Today's topic, financial planning for a medical resident. And as I always say, you don't need to make it overly complicated while you're still in training, but you need to start to build that foundation. So we're going to walk through some of the heavy hitters on that foundation, and they are student loans, budgeting, home ownership, investing, insurance. We're going to get to all of those. So stay tuned. That's all coming up next. First main point to cover is the harsh reality of student loans. Probably before you even decided to become a physician, you probably knew there was going to be a student loan snowball that was going to occur, right? Maybe you're fortunate where you don't have any or you have a very little amount, but the sad reality is most physicians not only have some student loan debt, they usually have a six-figure number, where I often refer to it as your first mortgage that you took on throughout your medical school. Maybe some undergrad still in there. Maybe there's a lot of undergrad in there, but medical school is usually where we see the bulk of that really jump up. Again, the goal of this video and the overall underlying blog post is what financial planning tips can we give to medical residents? Student loans become the top priority. Ideally, there's two paths, and the sooner you know those two paths, the better. Path one, the one that we really like, public service loan forgiveness. Take advantage of the systems that have been provided to you by the federal government, make your 120 payments, and boom, Uncle Sam picks up the tab. Best of all, not only does he pick up the tab, he also covers the tax on it. The other route is maybe academic medicine, a nonprofit hospital is not in your future. In this example, we're going to say, hey, the sooner we can decide that we're going to pay them off aggressively on the private side, we're going to go that route. I always say this, if you were undecided, or if you think there's a chance that you could get back to a nonprofit hospital, don't rush to move those to private. Once you move them to private, that is gone. If we've learned anything in the last 2 crazy years of student loan planning, it's stick with the federal loans as long as it makes sense, because that's where you're going to have the most opportunity, whether that's delayed payments, whether that's maybe some type of lump sum forgiveness at some point here, but you're going to have the most flexibility there. Now, if you know I'm going private practice, I'm on a partnership track, I love all the partners in here, I'm never leaving this place, okay, maybe we have it set there. But the reality is it's very rarely that clear, to the point where we usually tell our attending physicians, wait a year or two. Let's just make sure you do feel good at this practice. The partners do feel right. You feel like this is a long-term home. Just that small delay can go a long way, especially in the current world. It's a little bit easier because we know we have those payments delayed. Also, unique part of the current world that we're living in here in 2023 is with rates going up. It's going to start to get to the point where the average rate that's being offered by some of the private institutions might not even beat your federal loans. In that example, you never want to leave federal loans. If they're even close, stick with your federal loans. Don't refinance to private unless you know for certain that that is going to be the route you're going to go, because again, we can't fix that one. We're very good at student loans. There's a lot of smart people out there. There's a lot of smart attorneys. You can't fix that one. It's over. Once you get to private, it's gone. The main topic here is the sooner you know you're going for private payoff or going for public service loan forgiveness, the better. Obviously, life happens. Curveballs will occur. We've had physicians that were pretty much 2 years away from PSLF. Everything was perfect. And then they got the deal of a lifetime on a private offer, and they went private practice, and we had to pivot course. We've had physicians that were in private practice that came back to the nonprofit sector, and thank goodness the loans were never moved over, because now we can come back to PSLF. So big, important part as a medical resident, even again, bumping out to fellows, is understand your student loan options. I have more context in the blog post, but for the videos, I'm trying to hit the most common topics in the areas that we spend the most amount of time, whether we're speaking to a program or with a client or just even at a conference. Know that for student loans, do your research, understand which path is most likely for you, but PSLF would be ideal for any of you that can achieve it, but understanding that it's not for everyone, right? There's going to be some other paths in there. So phase one of your base financial plan as a resident, just know your student loans, know what your ideal path is going for. Next up, budgeting. Sometimes it's easier to call it cash flow because not everyone likes the term budgeting. However, budgeting is so important as a medical resident. This is the chance you have to lay that foundation. So when you do get that big kid paycheck, as we call it, and you become an attending, you have a foundation. You can almost monitor what lifestyle creep you're going to have in there. If you're going to go from $50,000 to $200,000 or $50,000 to $500,000, right? Depends on your specialty. But understanding money in, money out is vital. And it's not only vital while you're in training, it's going to become even more vital when you make that big step to attending. And even when you're attending, it's going to be vital for the rest of your life. Literally until the day we leave this earth, you should be tracking your cash flow. This one here, the goal is to just make sure you're budgeting. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be every day. In the actual blog post, which we'll have in the show notes for this, we have a template in there. We have a whole nother post, which is one of our most popular posts, whether it's the video or the blog post, on just budgeting for medical residents. So check that out as well. I won't go too much more detail here because we do have a lot of other context out there. Main takeaway here for this foundational aspect is make sure you're budgeting as a medical resident because it sets up the foundation as you go forward. Next foundational point, the rainy day fund, the emergency fund, the slush fund. It's going to be important no matter what name you give it. And this is one of those phases where this number can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And sometimes it's just starting with small goals that are achievable. Because even in the budget that we provide to medical residents on the blog post, monthly spending is around $3,000 per month. If you do a 3 times or a 6 times multiple, that's either $9,000 to $18,000. I'm going to be honest, we work with a lot of medical residents and fellows, and they don't usually come to us with that large of an emergency fund. Usually it's a couple thousand. If we get a 5, if we get a 10, we're super excited. So the key takeaway here is that you're trying to build in a cash flow. Continue to put money away. I know just as much as any other physician out there that you're underpaid for the amount of work and the hours that you're putting in, but you're still getting paid good income when you think of like an income perspective on what the actual numbers are across the United States. So my main point there is that you do have an opportunity to put away something. Even in the budget example, we use $100. $100 per month is still a good habit because it's there. And even if you have a couple $1,000s when you're done with your training, or maybe you have a 10, or maybe you do hit 20,000, it's only going to help you for that next chapter, whether it's pre-funding a true emergency fund for an emergency. Maybe it's actually giving you some wiggle room and what we call the gap month between when you finish your training to when your attending role starts. Maybe it's just to help you move across the country. Whatever it's going to actually provide for you, it's still going to be beneficial. So main takeaway here is don't neglect the emergency fund, and also make sure that you're starting to save to it. You don't need to set world records here, but you do want to build up some emergency fund, and ideally the larger you can make it, the better. But I also understand that sometimes giving people a huge number out of the gate can feel overwhelming, and then sometimes they just pass on it, right? Don't do that. Even small little increments, something you set up. Once this hits my bank account, $100 every month comes right into my savings account. Something like that will go a long way. So next foundational piece here is start to build your emergency. In the blog post, we give this section the title, Avoid Homeownership at All Costs. I'm going to be honest, I don't love that title because there are some circumstances where owning a home while you're in training can make sense, especially if you have a longer training. So if you know that your specialty could be a 7-year, 8-year program, and somehow you know that you'll also match up on all your fellowships at the same hospital, fantastic, right? I usually say the break even most of the time is around 5 years. So if you know that's the case, it's almost a slam dunk. Or if you say, hey, I'm going to buy this home, I know it's in a good medical city, I'm going to keep it as a rental property, another example where it could work. Maybe you bought at the bottom of the housing market and you caught it on the upswing. You can't time that though, right? So there are unique circumstances, but at least my general guidance is try to avoid home ownership while you're in training. And if you're listening to this, watching this as a resident or fellow, just to make sure that you understand, I also tell my attendings the first year or second year to keep that same idea in place, because you want to find the areas that you like the most. You want to make sure that you like the practice. You still got to make sure that you fit in, you really enjoy it before you start to really lay down those long-term roots, right? Buying a home is a long-term route. So in general, try to avoid home ownership while you're in training. I can tell you there are one-offs where it does work, but as a general guidance, try to avoid it if you can. Next up, 3 insurances that you should focus on while you're in training. I'm actually going to add a 4th in here. My 4th is going to be umbrella insurance. It's actually not noted in the blog post, but it is something I want to bring up to you on the video. Also, keep in mind, adding an umbrella policy. But the 3 that we list on there is medical malpractice, which if you're in academics, which you are at this point because you're in training, you're going to have some form of medical malpractice. It's embedded in there. You likely are going to have to buy it on your own, but it's something you want to keep an eye on. Health insurance is also not noted in here. I hope that you also have health insurance, right? That's another important one. We're not going to get into like the nuances of it. You also need auto insurance and renter's insurance and personal article and all that. We're not going to get into that level of detail. But the other 2 main ones here, disability insurance and possibly, depending on your situation, term life insurance. Disability, no brainer. you need this one. You need to get disability in place. Most importantly, while you're in training, you can have access to a special policy called a GSI, called a Guaranteed Standard Issue, which usually has some form of a discount in there. But most importantly, there is usually no underwriting, which is helpful no matter if you are male or female and you have bad health. That's going to be helpful. But for our female physicians, this can be a really important one because it's probably your last chance to get something called a unisex rate. And that's very important because that'll keep your costs dramatically lower, because unfortunately, the cost for disability insurance is much higher for female physicians. Check on that. Get a base policy in place. Get it in place while you're in training. Once you become an attending, you're going to likely want to increase that. And the other one is term life insurance. Usually I say this: if someone is reliant on your income, you need term life insurance. If someone co-signed on your loans, you need life insurance. If you're married, which again, this is someone's relying on your income. If you have children, these are easy. I don't even need to think this. You're going to want to have term life insurance in place, and it shouldn't make you fall out of your chair if I tell you somewhere between $3 to $5 million is a good start. Just take what your expected attending pay is going to be and multiply by 10 or 15. Heck, I could argue by 20. You need a couple $1 million, and that's not even with family planning. That's not even with a mortgage yet. That's not even with all the craziness that will come with life down the road as well. Keep that in mind. Those are the three that we've listed in there. I gave you a bonus of umbrella. You need other insurances as well, but at least for this as a resident, those are the cores that we want you to keep an eye on that you maybe have missed in the past, or maybe you've been kicking around the idea of getting these, but you haven't done so. Keep that in mind. Another core foundation here, get the proper insurances in place. Coming down the home stretch, last thing that we always like to bring up to our medical residents and fellows is don't ignore investing. I use the term don't set world records quite a bit because sometimes I think we either get into, oh my gosh, I have to save this amount, or my friend said they're doing this, where we just don't need to set world records. We don't need to compare ourselves to anyone else. We just need to do what's right for us. And usually while you're in training, yes, we know physicians get a later start. We're going to have plenty of opportunities down the road to really crank this up. But the reason why we like to start you sooner than later is just the fact that we're getting better compounding interest, right? It doesn't matter what the market does. The longer you're in the market, that's where you're going to have the greater opportunity for that compounding interest, that compounding growth, which is really the secret sauce in investing. So in this example here, if your program offers a 403B or 401k match, always make sure you're getting the free money. Even if they don't, maybe it makes sense to dabble in there a little bit. If you are going for public service loan forgiveness, I sometimes lean a little bit more towards pre-tax because that lowers your adjusted gross income, which then lowers your student loan payment. If you're not going for public service loan forgiveness, you might want to lean towards a Roth here in that qualified plan world. Again, 401ks, 403Bs. If you don't get a match, you could also make the case here, try to fill up your backdoor Roth IRA first. Usually based on your income, it also depends on if you're married and your tax filing status, you might still be to go directly to a Roth, meaning that you don't have to worry about the backdoor Roth IRA yet, but just keep an eye on that on both, one, your income, but also if you're married, what your spouse's income as well, because that will affect what you're able to do, whether you can go directly to the Roth or if you have to add in that extra step for the backdoor Roth. But main thing here is don't ignore investing. Whatever you can save now, you're just giving yourself a head start for that when that paycheck does jump up as an attendee, that you already have a good core in place there. But again, no world records. But if you can get the free match, if you can get some money into the Roth IRA, you are doing very good things here, and you will not be upset with those decisions later down the line, I promise. Next core, don't ignore investing, try to get some money in the markets. And there you have it, financial planning for a medical resident. And really the core here is that you're just trying to start to build that foundation and continue to build that foundation as you move into your attending. So whether it's getting your student loans organized, whether it's getting the proper insurances in place, whether it's finally getting that emergency fund up and running, all the way to the fine details of what types of insurance policies you should have in place. There are a lot of core pieces here that are not only important today while you're in your training as a resident or a fellow, but are going to be very transferable, if not even built upon, when you become an attending. So as always, thanks for tuning in here for the past 15 minutes or so. If you have not subscribed to the channel, that would be a great time to do so. Also, if you hit the bell icon, you'll also be notified every time we have new content. As always, my goal is to provide you with great content here to make this financial planning journey just a little bit easier for you. Our goal is to really help the medical community, the physician community, the best that we can. And we know that we can affect the most by getting out there on the socials. So that's why we love to release these videos on YouTube. So we hope this is helpful. Again, thanks for tuning in. As always, we'll catch you on the next video.